welcome to Almost Daily Zencast special segment. Good morning, Trumptopia. We've got 95 days left, and the game goes on. Think about it, folks. That's what, like 11 weeks or something? I'm terrible at math. It's either like 11 and a half weeks or it's 42 weeks. I don't know. I'm kidding. I jest. It's less than 100 days. Just like we measure the launching of a presidential establishment, a presidential administration, by the first 100 days, one could also sort of, count down to midnight like it's New Year's 1999. And you want it to be the future. Here we are, though. This is the future. I was truly shocked into a lack of confidence in terms of what to say. In large part because it's become so cartoonish that I almost fail to know what I want to say about it. But it truly is a countdown to an event that, in theory, determines the fate of our next pendulum swing. Not much anything else other than that, right? And do not be confused. Please do understand, dear listeners, especially if ye be new. Welcome, gather around. I'm not naive. I know that politicians are little more than stage puppets, and that theater of the political is a bit akin, as some meme recently accurately nailed it, to kabuki theater of the Japanese tradition, where the puppeteers don't try to hide. Like in American puppeteering, to give the semi-controversial example, The Dark Crystal, right? That's the epitome of what Jim Henson imagined and invented and coined and packaged as a production methodology, jam-packed with, aesthetics and rules of performance et al. In 2020. Well, if that's one example that most people are commonly accustomed to, in the Japanese tradition of theatrical puppeteering, the puppet manipulators are there, right there in plain sight, but they're wearing what in theater we sort of technically call ninja suits, which may or may not might not have been mildly racist of us, I guess, as an industry, for which I will bear some burden of that mental sin. But it's also technically accurate because these puppeteers, although standing right in front of your face, do, by the virtues of the brain magic that is invoked by thoughtful theater makers and theater making as a methodology, as an invocation, as a magic spell, and I don't mean that in a bad way. I mean that as we should bring healing, positive, spiritual thoughtfulness towards our art making. But these puppeteers sort of disappear because they are completely encased in some sort of theater velvety, all black ninja suit, literally and figuratively, not intentionally racist in any way, shape, or form. Although those who'd like to harangue would probably harangue about that one. I think I used that word correctly. If I did not, please forgive me. I'm a robot from an alternate timeline, sent here to warn you about what a dumb spiral y'all are on. So, no offense. It's not my judgment. It's the entire other human species that sent me. It's like, no, what are you guys doing over here? This is ridiculous. I was sent to say, I'm not here to judge you personally, humanity. It's not my role. But you gotta agree that the given moment we've just woken up into, where the 45th president of the United States, epically and always hypocritically, land of the free and home of the brave, that was built on, Indian burial ground and enslavement, genocide and slavery, etc., 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 etc. All the caveats, all the nuanced understandings. Not the absolutist paint with a big block brush. For dear listeners, if I have not made it plain and clear, absolutist thinking is a rabbit hole down which you do not need to go down. It's a waste of your time, because you will immediately learn the pains in the ass of having to eat your own words, because you've painted too absolutistly about humanity in such a way that is verifiably, easily, and instantly debunkable, and you'll look a fool. And I say that to you not in any admonition or critique of anyone in particular, but as a meta-observation based on 30 years of phenomena. There's a word I'm trying to remember that I can't right now. Because, for all the various reasons that I couldn't. But I digress. As an observer of humanity, I have come to such conclusions, and you'll just have to bear with me. And others have come to such conclusions, because I am not alone in my observationing. And anybody who sits and observes oneself and one's arrival into this moment via the infinite unfolding fractal of human history, and takes a time to get a metacognitive bird's eye view of our limited, totally admittedly flawed and full of things to critique self-understanding of history. For let us question everything, right? But here's my point. Absolutist thinking will get you into trouble. And I try to avoid doing it at all possible opportunity. So here we are in the breakneck speed sprinty part. Good Lord. That's going to be exhausting, because it's a lot of days. And I don't know about all of you kind and lovely folks and where you are on the dismal infographic from the absolute most poverty-stricken of the poor to those who will never have to lift a finger of work in any day of their lives ever because of previously arrangements prior to whatever this thing we call 2020 it has become. I, for limited self-disclosure, must admit to you, am floating somewhere near the bottom end of that spectrum, where I'm blessed by certain circumstances to be, which happen to be true in my life, but also on the verge of total disaster. Right? I'm one friendly, free Trump money government check away from absolute disaster, and am fortunate enough that that absolute disaster comes with a few other little mini packaged golden parachutes. But the game is either we help everyone everywhere lift everyone everywhere else up, or we point fingers at each other ad nauseum. And they are playing us every which way possible against the middle quite successfully, if I dare say, dear friends and listeners. And that's my meta-analysis of all of this. Like, I'm trying to build an analogy in my head, and I'm realizing that that's not a good idea, I don't think, for a live moment on the radio. If I had a multi-syndicated live radio TV show, I would definitely want. That's why you have, other voices and staff, so that you don't sit there and work away at that and don't have time away from the microphone. But if I lost whatever thread of an analogy I was building. I found it comically interesting whenever I saw this at some point in the last fortnight worth of news upon news bombardments, but that the family and estate of Ronald Reagan has asked this president of the United States to please, oh please, stop fucking using our image and likeness. Not my image and likeness, the image and likeness of Ronald Reagan, upon which the estate and the family must still somehow manage to eke out a mighty fine living, for he was a very adorable presidential puppet that was beloved by millions. And it has been a distinct pleasure of mine to be able to say to many an internet associate, no, that's the wrong term, acquaintance, a public discourse jousting, there's a word, but I forget what it is, when they are fellow competitors in a thing. But, many people have come to realize very recently, and I mean no offense by this, but very Johnny-come-lately in a fashion as to be the living archetypes of it, to the realization that politics is not as bright and shiny, beautiful and perfect and true, and the human experience here on Earth is not as idyllic on any platform, on any regard, in any way, shape, or form than once at some point in one's life previously imagined. Priorly imagined? Now, not to sound smug, but I personally came to that realization about politics slowly and over many years revisiting, but basically from my observations, direct observations in real life, vis-a-vis the media, etc., at all, of President Reagan himself. And that he was, in the real time, a president that spoke admirably and aspirationally in ways that I could agree with and could feel I think, in my earnest youth that for many might be laughably too soon for politics, and or too naive for politics, which I wouldn't disagree with necessarily in general. But I was a savvy young whippersnapper of a robot from the future sent here to warn you about your own demise. And I could argue at you that I was recognizably a little bit ahead of the curve for the era, for the time, for the thinking itself. My earliest controversial memory of engaging with news is when the first mention of gay rights as being a special marginalized offshoot of human rights that needed organizing around for the purposes of redressing or asking the government redress over it for lack of. I remember having a very serious conversation with a somewhat like shocked and surprised family where I bluntly pointed out to them, what's there to debate? Are they or are they not humans? Therefore, do they not get human rights? And if we have to defend what is the equivalent human right for their variation of human, then it's, it's not so much that we've got to create that right as we've got to stop abusing them over that feature of being a human. Or both, right? Arguably. Not to brag. This isn't about bragging. I'm just saying, to drive a point home, I've been curious, fascinated by, to some degree, entertained by politics. I can be quoted as once having said on social media that politics is the only sports that I get a little bit enthusiastic about watching. Because it has real world impacts on people. No matter how jaded or cynical of a view one might take. And trust me, I have my days where I'm like, are all of these motherfuckers also robots? Because some days they act like it. Like robots from some other inferior timeline, different than my own. But I digress. The United States of Trumptopia has 95 days for it to punch back at this, what could, if things go wrong, right? Because that's how we've set up polemic thinking. If things go horribly wrong, we don't want that. What do we do to try to avoid that? Right? That's how we reflexively have programmed ourselves to reflexively cope with large political action anyways, even if it were something milder. Like, if Bush Sr. had a second term by natural order of things and had done some increasingly groping for power type things, as I've pointed out before in the show, not by me personally, but by plenty of others, almost every president in our immediate living memory of history has been called a tyrant by the oppositional base. But dear old Donnie Trump has taken it the step too far, in my personal humble opinion, to cross the line and stumble into that end zone that proves he's interested overtly in flirting with an American tyrannical chapter of history. And if he can't pull it off, I wonder who will carry on that mantle. That's my big concern. A little less, like, I'm a little bit more worried about that than I am about whether or not Trump will lose 2020. I could be wrong, knock on wood, but I have come to the conclusion that I have a high level of certainty that he will not be allowed to win a second term by some means or another. Mysterious or straightforward, cosmic, or as the insurance companies love to claim, act of God. But somehow or another, by January 3rd or whatever it is, that day when people might be concerned that Trump has somehow made some weird... And the fact that this is being openly contemplated in media at large, except for possibly not on Fox News. I haven't obsessively compulsively combed the last 3 weeks of Fox News footage. But trust me, the day I've got the bankroll and the capital investment to be like, have a team. Like, all right, team, don't get suckered into the brainwashing of each individual channel. That's why we you rotate. But you're going to scrub through all the footage, minus commercials, because who needs to watch that shit over and over again, of other news media, and you're going to find the quirky shit, the weirdo stuff, the quirky, weird patterns that no one's put together, because there's something to it. And part of it is the snowflakey, and I don't mean that in the current post-contemporary meaning of snowflake. I mean in the awe-inspiring... Everything's unique but different, but unique but different, but unique. But the same, about humanity. For we truly are, to belabor the point and beat the dead horse and make the cliche a cliche, humanity truly is a fractal expression of an infinite array of diversity and sameness mushed together. And we are... just like individual snowflakes, our own unique, special, princessy, unique, special thing that no one else ever... We could venture to say, except for the obvious doppelgangers that are like, recombinant... I don't think direct clones of any kind of time travel issue. I think it's like the human genome spits out a recombinant, recursive... expression of every possible variant of what a human being looks like. And that's going to spit out a few duplicates here and there. Because, whatever principles of aesthetic are guiding that process. But I digress. There's like a whole array of conspiracy theory that pokes or prods or builds on this notion, this reality, that statistically speaking, if you look backwards through history in sort of like a facial recon, like this is how you train AIs, in fact, I'm sure people have used it to train AIs, and just feed an AI a bunch of faces, you'll find some that are eerie matches. There's Reddit articles all over the place, like, why do people from history look like people today? Why do some celebrities have ancient portraits, or, and it's a simple, I think the simplest, most realistic explanation is that the human multiversic centipede of cranking out babies makes some similar looking ass people every once in a while. And an infinite array of opposites splurging and coming back towards centers of similarity. Why am I rambling about that? Who knows? Happy August, everybody. We officially survived multiple and obviously incorrect, which I called, thank you very much, prophecies of ends of the world that peppered all of January, February, March, April, May, June, and July. June and July, for whatever reasons this year, just liberally sprinkled with ends of the world prophecies. And I told you so to anybody listening along that I had a discussion with on social media. Did not happen, did it? I don't think it did. It looks like the same old humdrum every day, although I guess it is a little bit awkwardly, weirdly lit. Right this hot second. But I will shit my pants with laughter if somehow today is some sort of apocalyptic unveiling of apocalyptic proportions. I don't think it's going to happen, and I have a pretty effing solid reasoning why. My true and sincere and honest understanding of Revelation and apocalypse is that in a spiritual sense, once you deeply comprehend what is being communicated in those words, and not so much in the craziness that's in that book, although some of the things in that book feed into this theory too. It's been forever since I've literally read the book, but I have read it. Don't get me wrong. I've just forgotten most of it, I think. But that the Bible itself is a woven document, which means that there's probably a lock code that unlocks things, and there's other texts we're supposed to look at, not the story that's on the surface. And the ancient roots of those words mean perpetual and ever ongoing disclosure. And the mystics who have addressed the significance of these words in prior teachings to the Catholic teaching, which in all honestness, everything about Catholicism got hijacked in order for Catholicism to become the embodiment of the hijacking of all ideological constructs and religions created by man, right? Like, there's a reason why we have memes about how if you can't believe that so-and-so would do such a so-and-so thing, you haven't studied history, Catholic history, enough. You know, when religion ruled supreme, we literally had a Dark Ages where it was routine that those deemed unworthy would just get butchered alive in the name of God in a torturous, heinous, disgusting, vomit-inducing kind of way. But baby with the bathwater, right? Warnings against absolutist thinking. Am I crazy to... The nuance is that, like, somewhere in the co-opted statements made by the pre-existing ancient mystics that led to all of this cacophony of ideological echo chambers, there is this notion of, which makes a lot of sense in terms of meeting reality in reality's terms, that apocalypse and all of that is pointing towards a perpetual unfolding and disclaimering, a perpetual singing of the song that is reality. And one way of interpreting a collection of different ideas in an omist sort of, if I can claim a reference to that, I don't know how official it is. I don't know if there's like a church that's registered in a country and it's like the official religion of some people somewhere for reals. But there's the idea that's been memified of Om-ism, knowing that no religion holds the absolute truth, but all religions have their roots in some deep truths that are truly true. And from that perspective, from that epistemological, if I can conjugate that word that way, perspective, we can concur, we can come to an agreement that reality itself, unfolding itself, being the mind of God, dreaming this illusory, holographic, self-recursive multiplex of experience, that indeed is fractal and self-recursive in its nature in every axis of every way that sentence has meaning, including you being a multiplex of yourself, including me being a multiplex of myself, that there are an infinite array of iterations of me being who this body avatar is, and all the infinite ways that that expression could have rolled the dice collectively to live a life. That is the ribbon, one could say. One could argue, if I may put a pin in this, that there are artists, and there always have been, now and in the recent past and in the future, that make art that references this, that makes the point to bring this to light by either including it aesthetically or referencing it intellectually via a million different ways that art can do that. And it can be a confusing place to start from, because it's difficult to discern what is meant to be literal and true, and what is, of course, the packaging of fanciful fiction that provides the storytelling engagement to make the product viable. So one must hone one's skills. And a popular example is that people take the movie The Matrix, with Morpheus seeking out Neo to be pulled out of this mental prison that is virtual, like an immersive VR, to live in the real meat and bone place, which is a tore up, toxic waste dystopian future, because freedoms, right? Like, we don't deserve to all live as copper top batteries. Now, what was interesting is that as an artistic expression, there has been some attempt to claim, and I don't know if this is true, I've never been able to interview the cast from The Matrix, but I would love to. So throwing that out there, the universe, if the cast of The Matrix ever wanted to be interviewed by this literary fictional character known as the incorrigible Mr. Zeppo, let's get it to happen. Because boy, oh boy, do I have questions that I doubt are being commonly asked of them in their typical interview engagements with media talking head types. Including the very, very, audience delineating issue. Is The Matrix figuratively true, or is it literally true? And this is where it's an interesting question to invoke, because it has huge, powerful, meaningful consequences in the flesh and bone reality of wherever you, dear listener or reader or viewer of this content, might be sitting. Because you've got to ask yourself then, does that include my scope or experiencing of reality? Does that include, am I in a virtual prison? If it's literally true, am I, like Neo, in a tube full of protein goo that is designed to keep me tactily subjugated and immersed in the illusory virtual hologram reality in which I occupy an avatar that is computer code and light, effectively? Or is it only allegorically true? Which is a radically different outcome, right? If it's only allegorically true, there's many interpretations. But if we were to tap right into the many worlds theory of a literal universe according to physics, literally, an allegorically true, analogous interpretation of the Matrix could be that the consciousness entity we call the cosmos, it has a feminine aspect or individuation that we can call Mother Earth, and that all of this is a womb in which we play out all these lives upon lifetimes of lives, so that the meta-consciousness of us as an individual can come to fruition and be ultimately born up and out of this material goop into an ethereal plane of otherworldly existence. And that's an interesting question, right? How do you even untie that knot once you've contemplated that? Because the computer simulation, computer hologram theory of the universe is pretty seductive. It's pretty wild. So who's playing the video game? And is it literally just me in a different bodysuit, in a different level that's even more real, hyper real than this character I'm currently stuck in until death, where the days are longer and the love is stronger and how does the rest of the song lyric go? I forget. Or is it a foreign alien? Are we all insectoidal lizard people that live in another planet other than Earth at all? What the fuck? What are we talking about? But here's the ultimate mindfuck. Is that even knowable here and now? Yes or no? No. Finding out the answer to that question would be mighty interesting, wouldn't it? Now, it really depends how many leaps of logic you're willing to take, or whether you have to draw a hard line of I can't go any further because those are unknowables. And if they are unknowables, further speculation is jack shit pointless, right? Given that divide, which is a weird mindfucky divide, are we even real, or are we totally ghosts in an illusion so rich that we have fooled ourselves into believing that we're real? Now that's really depressing, because that means all of this experience lived by those we must presume to be out there as other, good, bad, horrible, miserable, brilliant, amazing, divine, all that experience becomes moot, becomes meaningless, because it's only so real as it is fake. And beyond that, it's not real at all. It's like a video game. And if it were a video game, you could realize then it sits on a shelf amongst a collection of video games, some of which you play once, some of which you play every day for 3 years, some of which you never play ever again. Right? In a collection of these sorts of things, and that's mildly, nihilistically, maddeningly depressing. And ultimately you get snared around the question, is this reality enough? Or is there some level that's base prime that is somewhere I can get to right now? Contemplate these questions and revisit your political spectrum of opinion. That's what I'm saying. If we're going to fix reality, no matter what's going on, if we're going to fix reality, we should not ignore the spiritual and the esoteric, because maybe that's one of the reasons why we keep beating our faces into the same meat grinder over and over and over again. As always, friends, thank you for joining me on the journey of weird word rhythms and rabbit-hole thoughts of spiraling madness, as I dare question what will happen. Set your sights to 95 days from now and think about what it is we can do as a species to make that transition the best possible transition. And may peace, love, and grooviness blossom in your hearts as we move forward into that moment.